Hello, I'm Grim, and welcome back to Washer Dryer. With Rusty Bucket Bay finally behind us, we begin on what is the starting of the final leg of this journey. Yes, indeed, it's time for the final game world, which just so happens to be my favourite game world, which just so happens to be Click Clock Woods. Now, I've probably said that other levels are my favourite game world, and indeed, when I said it for those worlds, it was also true. I have several favourite game worlds in Banjo-Kazooie, so sue me. Or actually, please don't, litigation is not in our budget. But regardless, I do have several favourite levels of this game, all dependent on what exact mood I'm in. If it's around Decemberween, I'm obviously going to love Freeze Easy Peak. If it's the spooky season, you can't really go past Mad Monster Mansion. And if it's just any time of the year, well, Click Clock Woods, due to the nature of the level, really has something for any occasion. Now, before I get to talking too much about the present, a bit of a comment on the past, as unfortunately, some of the video I recorded for this episode was very weirdly corrupted. So what you've missed between this installment and the previous installment of Washer Dryer is we obviously unlocked the level, we opened a note door or two, and we collected the overworld Jiggy that we unlocked from the Gruntilda switch in Rusty Bucket Bay. So that's the past all caught up. Sorry I wasn't able to show it, but I didn't want to cause anyone an epileptic fit from the weird jutteriness that came in the video. And quite fortunately it was only that first footage that seems to have been corrupt, and the footage that was really important, the actual gameplay of the world, is completely fine, so let's get on with it. And so Click Clock Woods, the game world which was cleverly able to reuse a huge amount of assets but still make it fresh by cycling through the 4 seasons. We're obviously starting with spring, as we're forced to do, and if you're wondering why I was running into the corners of the area like a madman, it's because I remember at some point I have to search for worms and figure I should start early. I've always thought this level was basically genius. It's really cool to see how the weather changes and affects the land depending on what season it is, how it affects the environment, and also the passage of time and basically time travel in this level is really quite fascinating. The fact that to achieve goals in summer, autumn, or winter, you have to have done things in previous seasons, and if you go into the later season and realise you've not done it, you can go back in time essentially into a previous season, complete the task, come back to the later season and see what you've done in the prior season has had an effect in the future. It's really just an ingenious piece of level design. And also, much as I said for the Christmas tree in Freeze Easy Peak, I just love the whole feel of being so small in comparison to the entire environment. Both the Christmas tree from Freeze Easy Peak and this entire level makes me feel like I'm playing a Chip and Dale cartoon, specifically Pluto's Christmas tree for Freeze Easy Peak and Out on a Limb for Click Clock Woods. Even the giant birds that jump out at you strongly remind me of Donald Duck's Pruners. I'm not sure if Rare had that cartoon in mind when they designed the level, but I do feel like they probably did. The only real downside that I feel Click Clock Woods has is that, unfortunately, because it is basically 4 levels in one, and none of the 4 seasons, despite each of them basically being the same size as any other level in the game, can sometimes feel a little bit sparse. There is, after all, still just the same amount of Gingos and music nodes and Jiggies spread out across these 4 different stages of this level, and even with the addition of the worms and Nabnuts Nuts, well, it just kind of feels that in Click Clock Woods there's far less collectibles than any other level in the game. And so, as we make our way towards the summit of this tree, as we will do many times across these next few videos throughout many different seasons, let's speed things up a bit past the sparseness until we get to something of note. And what, dare I ask you, is more noteworthy than literally being able to summon summer? Yes, indeed, much like in the Nightmare Before Christmas, which may well be yet another inspiration for this level, we've opened a door in a tree in a forest that leads to another time and another season. But it's not yet time to time travel, so instead we visit our gluttonous squirrel friend Nabnut, who's chowing down on some nuts, and make like we're playing The Legend of Zelda and promptly rob him of his eggs. It serves him right, he shouldn't have been keeping them out, freestanding on a high shelf like some sort of barbarian. I, having visited the kitchen of the Rusty Bucket at Rusty Bucket Bay and Nabnut's house, am forced to wonder what is wrong with these characters. But from eggs to larger eggs, let's fast forward once more as we continue our ascent. This here rather large egg had me somewhat worried, not because of what it may contain, but instead because of my previous experiences with rather large eggs. You see, I recall in Bubble Gloop Swamp that I don't think I was able as a washer dryer to crack the rather large egg there. Luckily it seems here this wasn't an issue and we managed to free Eerie the mighty eagle from her shell. Though that doesn't really mean much yet, as simply freeing Eerie doesn't really give you anything. Before we can receive our much-deserved Jiggy for our hard-earned efforts, we're going to have to go into the next 2 seasons and feed the giant clawsome worms, and, well, I don't exactly have high hopes for that working out. After all, considering how character interaction has gone throughout this Wash and Dry series, it often hasn't. And so considering that our getting the Jiggy from Big Bird is not only reliant on us collecting the right amount of worms, but the game actually recognizing that we're near the bird with the amount of worms not once but twice, I fully expect that this is going to be one of several Jiggies that we're simply not going to be able to get in Click Clock Woods. That slight negative aside though, one Jiggy that we will almost certainly be able to get is this one right here, which we have actually just gotten. So that's at least something. 1 out of 10, while not being good, is at least a start. I think in this level, we're probably going to be able to get at least 7 Jiggies, but much like Eerie, I think we're going to encounter issues with Nabnuts because, once again, it's a character trigger, and possibly also the Jiggy from the bees in the beehive. That one could go either way, but because they don't react to the bee transformation, and because the Washer Dryer is perceived in the game as a transformation, they may well mistake the Washer Dryer as a bee, funnily enough, and just do nothing. We should, however, have no trouble with the Gingos, which I've just gotten the first of, which means it's time to start making our way down the tree again. I was going to go the long way, but because I'm time conscious, instead decided, entirely purposefully and not at all because I'm clumsy, on taking a shortcut. Whether it's flying or falling with style, it got me down to the base of the tree pretty darn fast. And so, now that I am down on the ground, for better or worse, I might as well do some of the challenges closer to the water level, which is mainly involving a little bit of gardening, collecting a bit of music notes, and planting a couple of seeds. Those seeds are, in fact, not really seeds at all, but instead eggs, which never really made sense to me, but it seems to work like a treat, so let's just not ask questions. I mean, I suppose an egg is a bird seed as it will grow into a mighty bird, though that logic somewhat falls apart when that bird egg is being laid by a washer-dryer, and rather than growing into either a bird or a washer-dryer, is growing into a flower. But regardless, it's time to start making our way to Mumbo Jumbo, as it's the place to be, and while we do, let's speed things up just a little bit. I had actually in fact fully expected to probably eventually fall off the tree, as it's kind of difficult platforming on this level even when you're not a washer-dryer, and when you are, it becomes even more difficult as, once again, as I've stated multiple times throughout this challenge, it's really difficult to judge the actual hit detection of your character, and so platforming can be somewhat miserable. And that's why, as you might have noticed earlier and are seeing now, I purposely tried to avoid picking up as many honeycombs as I could, because I figured they would almost certainly come in handy later. Speaking of later, it's time to slow down and get transformed. And with that, I am now a bear and a bird, who is a washer and dryer, who is a bee, which may well be one of the strangest combinations in all of history. However, unfortunately, there's not really much you can do as a bee in Click Clock Woods. The transformation is, I feel, really underused. I mean, unless I'm dramatically missing something, there's no challenges or anything that are reliant on the bee, there's no minigames that you need to transform into the bee to do, and even this level's miniature hub world with all of the trees has branches hanging above that if you transform into the bee you can access, but when you go up there, there's really nothing of interest. It would have been at bare minimum a great place to hide an extra life trophy, but even more significantly, would have been good for one of the Gingos or even just a Jiggy. I mean, I know you need the bee to get the overworld Jiggy from this level's Gruntilda switch, but within the actual level itself, the bee is rather tragically pointless. In the entire game, the only thing that it seems to allow you to do is gain access to the beehive while in spring, which gets you one measly Gingo. And while granted you don't get the Jinjo Jiggy for the level unless you collect all Jinjos, it just seems like a rather small prize and rather tiny challenge for an entire transformation. And off the top of my head, I can't even remember if you can even use a bee in the later seasons. I am fairly sure though that you in fact can't, but let's lament less and move straight along. I mean, after all, as the Beatles once said, let it be, and we indeed should do so, as, regardless of how underused the bee is, we've had a pretty darn successful beginning to Click Clock Woods. So far, one Jiggy has been collected, and we are well on our way with 2 Gingos collected to getting the Jinjo Jiggy, And even though I have high doubts that we'll actually get a Jinjo from Erie, well, that challenge is at least begun. And so that's probably a pretty good place to end this episode. Tune in next week as the washer dryer finds itself in summertime. And until then, thanks for watching, and I have been and still am Grim Grindle. If you would like to join me on social media, a link to my Twitter is in the description below, and if you would like to join the Channel Grim and Grin Discord, the Echo Chamber, a link to that is also available.